Hi knitting friends, Shaina Bilow here. In today's video, I'm going to walk you through the steps of working a simple mathematical equation that will help you determine how to decrease stitches evenly in your knitting projects. Occasionally you'll encounter a pattern, some of them might be mine, where you have to decrease maybe 20 stitches evenly across a row, or the pattern asks you to go from one number of stitches down to another without quite explaining how on one row or round. That's what we're going to work out together today. So get your calculator ready, be brave, and let's do some math together. The first step to figuring out how to decrease evenly is to understand what we're doing here. So what we're essentially doing is taking our total number of stitches and figuring out how many stitches belong in the spaces between the decreases as we're knitting the row. So in this example here, I have 6 decreases. Each one of these letter X's is a decrease. For each decrease, I'm going to be working, in this case, a knit 2 together. Maybe you're working an SSK, an SKPO, whatever decrease you're using here uses 2 stitches. So a knit 2 together uses 2 stitches and combines them into one. Same as an SSK, same as the SKPO. So in our equation, this number 2 here refers to the number of stitches that are used in each decrease. That's what that number 2 here in the equation represents. So let's start with an easy example. We're going to take the total number of stitches on our needles and subtract 2 times the number of decreases that we intend to do from that number. So for the first example, let's make it pretty easy. 100 stitches on the needles minus, let's say we want to decrease 50 stitches. 2 times 50. So that is 100 minus 100 equals 0. So X in this case is equal to 0. So 0 divided by the number of decreases, this one here, 50, equals 0. And so 0 is the number of stitches between each decrease. So in this instance, I would be working knit 2 together, or whatever decrease you choose, across the row. Knit 2 together across the row. There are no stitches between each decrease, 0 stitches between each decrease. And that makes sense because 100 minus 100 is 0. For 50 stitches to be decreased times 2, we're not knitting anything in between there. So that one was a pretty simple example. We'll continue doing more examples and they'll get a little more challenging each time. One thing I do want to note is that I assume you have the mathematical skill to figure out if your pattern is saying decrease to a number rather than saying how many stitches to decrease, that you'll be able to figure out how many to decrease. All right. I'll explain that a little more in a minute. All right. Our second example. Let's go with 120 stitches on the needles. And our pattern asks us to end with 100 stitches. So we need to decrease 20. So 120 minus 2 times 20, which is 40. So that turns into 120 minus 40 equals 80 stitches. So 80 is our X here. Okay, so X, 80, divided by the number of decreases, which was 20, equals 4. So 4 is the number of stitches between each decrease. So my row would look like this. Knit 2 together, knit 4. And you would repeat that across the row. How are you doing? Are you with me? I hope so. They're going to get a little more challenging. I have 2 more examples. All right. In our next example, let's start with 60 stitches on the needles, and we want to decrease 24 stitches. So minus 2 times 24, so that means 60, minus 48 equals 12. So 12 is our x in this case. This is our number of decreases, the 24. Okay, so if we take x, 12, divided by number of decreases, 24, we get a 0.5 as our number of stitches between each decrease. As you know, it's pretty hard to knit half of a stitch. You've got to knit whole stitches. So what we're going to do here is actually look at this half, and if we were to take a knit 2 together and then knit 1 half, knit 2 together, knit 1 half, what we have here is a whole stitch if we take these 2 halves. So my row would look like this: knit 2 together, knit 2 together, knit 1. So I do 2 knit 2 togethers plus the whole knit 1 that was spread in half amongst those 2, and I repeat that across the row. That's how you deal with a half symbol in this case. For our final example, let's expand on what we just learned here and use some new numbers. So let's imagine we have 100 stitches on our needles, and our pattern is asking us to decrease to 84. 100 minus 84 tells us that we need to decrease 16 stitches. So 2 times 16 equals, or changes to, 100 minus 32 equals 68, where x is 68. So we're going to put that down here. X, so 68, divided by the number of decreases, in this case 16, equals 4.25. And again, you can't knit a quarter of a stitch. So what your row would kind of look like here, if we were to write it out the same way we did for the previous equation, would be decrease, and then knit 4 1/4, decrease, knit 4 1/4, decrease, knit 4 1/4, and so forth. And what we have here when we have quarters is 4 sets of, you need 4 sets of 1/4 to equal a whole. So let's take a look now at a decrease and knit 4 1/4 4 times. So we've got 4 sets of these decrease, knit 4 1/4. If we take the quarter from here and the quarter from here and the quarter from here and add them to this quarter right here, we now have 4, 4, 4. So we took those quarters away from these 4s and we added it to here. We now have 5 there. So our pattern would be decrease, knit 4, decrease, knit 4, decrease, knit 4, decrease, knit 5 at the end. So one way you could write this out in a pattern would be knit 2 together, knit 4 3 times, and then knit 2 together, knit 5. And then you would repeat this entire function over and over and over to get your 16 decreases done. Well, actually, you repeat it 4 times, right? Because we have 4 groups here. 16 divided by 4 equals 4. You can get really into the math if you want to, or you can just kind of go mathematical light, like I'm showing you here. One thing you want to think about, because not every number will be a clear half or quarter or 3/4. Sometimes you have 0.33, sometimes you have, some wacky 0.72 stitches between each decrease. The general idea with what we're talking about today is that you want to have your decreases evenly spaced as best you can. It does not have to be perfect. The interesting thing about combining math with knitting is that knitting itself is this flexible, fluid, soft art form, and math is more sharp and precise. So you have to meet in the middle a little bit. So it might be occasionally that you have 2 stitches at the beginning, 3 stitches at the end, and then 10 stitches between each of your decreases or something like that. You can fudge a little bit and it's okay. It will be fine. I can't wait to see how you do with this. Please let me know in the comments if this was useful for you. Happy knitting.